Hi, my name's Phil. I like to come out politics, and the questions just keep stacking up for Nigel Farage. He still hasn't explained who paid for the Clacton House and whether all taxes have been paid correctly. But now there's a trickier question to deal with. Now that a close associate has admitted to multiple counts of bribery, taking money from Russia in return for promoting Kremlin talking points in the European Parliament, it invites a difficult question for Nigel Farage. Given that Farage made these same sort of statements himself, was he also doing it in return for bribes? Or was he selling out his own country for free? And why has Nathan Gill, Farage's former close associate, admitted his guilt? Has he offered testimony against others as part of a plea bargain? Is Farage secretly being investigated for collusion with Russian authorities himself? I think it's time to just ask questions, don't you? But first, for daily news and politics, please click the subscribe button to stay notified. So this could be really quite serious. I discussed Nathan Gill in my stream at the weekend, but I have some genuine questions about Nigel Farage's behaviour in the European Parliament as an MEP. So Nigel Farage was famous for pushing the Kremlin narrative in the European Parliament. He blamed the EU and NATO for Russia's invasion of Ukraine in 2014. Now, why did he do that? Well, there are some far-right figures in the West who see Putin's Russia as a bit of a model to copy. They believe liberal democracy makes them weak and think having a strong authoritarian control makes a country strong. The fact that the only winners in this Russia are those who are incredibly wealthy, as long as they stay away from open fifth floor windows, that is neither here nor there for them because they are rich themselves. Doesn't matter that the poor are crushed underfoot. So Farage may well have attacked the West and promoted Russia in the European Parliament because, you know what, that's what he genuinely believes. Nothing to do with money. Whether it's what his voters believe is another matter. We generally find not. But then we had an investigation by counter-terrorism officers and subsequent admissions from his close associate of many years, Nathan Gill. Nathan Gill was an MEP at the same time as Nigel Farage, first in UKIP, and then when Farage left UKIP, Gill followed him literally 2 days later. He became Brexit Party MEP, and then after Brexit, Farage made him the Reform UK Welsh leader. So there can be no doubt that Gill and Farage were professionally at least very close to one another. And now Gill, after investigation by counter-terrorism investigators, has admitted to taking Russian bribes during that period after he followed Nigel Farage out of UKIP, in return for making statements favourable to the Russian government in the European Parliament. Now, to be clear, I'm not trying to make Farage guilty by association here. There's more to this. So what does the admission of guilt mean? It means that Putin's Russia was actively trying to bribe MEPs to make pro-Russian statements. That is now established fact. It is reasonable to suppose, is it not, that they would have attempted to bribe other MEPs as well. Why would you only bribe one? There are likely to be several MEPs or former MEPs now who have taken these bribes, or have at least been offered them. So what has this got to do with Farage? Even if he was close with Gill, which he was, it doesn't mean Gill would have told his party leader that he was taking bribes. It's not the sort of thing you boast about, is it? No. But surely if the Russians had approached Gill with a view to taking bribes, they would have done so with others like him. That would surely include Nigel Farage. Why would they try to bribe Gill and not Farage? So the first question journalists need to be asking is whether Nigel Farage was ever approached by Russians offering bribes. Beggars belief that they would not have done so. And if they did offer him bribes and he turned them down, because, he's an honest bloke, Nigel, why didn't he report it? Because it's this simple. One of three things must be true here. The first is that the Russians never approached Farage to bribe him, given that we know that he did for his close political ally at the time. This seems unlikely. The second is that the Russians did approach Farage, but he turned them down. I'm not taking bribes, he said, but I'm not aware of any evidence he reported it. So that means he concealed a serious crime. And he allowed that crime to be perpetrated by others when it could have been stopped. The third possibility is that Farage accepted the bribes. We know that he made these same sort of pro-Russian statements that Gill made. Gill has now admitted accepting money for those statements. Farage made the same statements. So what we don't know is on what basis did Farage make those statements? Was he doing it for rubles or did he do it for free? These are the questions which need put into Farage. We can prove that he raised the same issues in the European Parliament, which we now know was paid for by the Kremlin on the part of his former close colleague. It is more than reasonable to ask on what basis Farage made those statements. If Gil needed money to make them, on what basis was Farage making them? It is reasonable to suppose that if the Russians were targeting UKIP and former UKIP MEPs for bribes, that they would target Farage. What's he got to say about that? Oh, and I saw someone else suggest something else. So Gil has admitted guilt, but this isn't a standard criminal investigation. It's counter-terrorism investigation. It concerns national security because Putin's Russia is a state which is hostile to us. They've literally murdered people on British soil, even now are threatening us. Did Gil admit guilt just because usually the reason for admitting your guilt is, look, your counsel tells you, your legal counsel tells you the evidence is so overwhelming you are going to be found guilty and you'll get a tougher sentence if you waste the court's time. So admit your guilt, you get a lighter sentence. Was it that? Or was it something else? Because I seem to find he was charged in February, but he's just admitted his guilt this month. So that's like a 7-month gap. What was happening during those 7 months? Have the security services been negotiating with him a lighter sentence in return for information, a plea bargain? Has Gil grassed a few others up? Because there will have been others. Is there a covert investigation going on right now which could turn into more charges in the next few years for others around him? We know Nigel Farage has taken money from the Russian state. That's a matter of fact. Not for bribery. It's all legal in terms of what we know. But he's done it all the same. He's been paid by Russia Today, Kremlin-controlled broadcaster. There are other links. Like one of his major donors is David Lilly, who has huge business interests in Russia, even now. There was a time a few years ago when Nigel Farage insisted he'd never met the Russian ambassador. This is a photo of him meeting the Russian ambassador. We know that Russia-based bots have a history of boosting the algorithm for Nigel Farage tweets in the days before Elon Musk bought the platform and amplified those sort of things for free. Farage praised Putin over his subjugation of protesting Syrians. Of course, he could easily have done that for free because it triggered a huge refugee crisis, which has in no small part created the fertile ground for the far right on immigration and asylum policies in Europe. When Russia invaded Ukraine, Farage made an angry speech in the European Parliament. Of course, it's absolutely disgraceful. He blamed the EU for it. Just the sort of thing the Kremlin would be terribly pleased about. Oh, brilliant distraction. Thanks, Nige, mate. None of these links prove any wrongdoing on Farage's part, but the links between himself and the Russian state are everywhere. And now that someone close to him is known to have been taking bribes from the Russian state for doing exactly what Farage also did in the European Parliament, well, these are questions which need asking. So why isn't the mainstream media asking them? And if Farage doesn't give satisfactory answers, keep asking them. Just like they should be about who paid for his Clacton house, because it wasn't his partner. And while they're at it, perhaps journalists might also ask the authorities if they received any information from Gil about others who may have taken bribes. They will, of course, say no comment. Perfect. But worth just asking the question. Nigel Farage likes asking questions, doesn't he? Let's see if he likes this question. Is Nigel Farage being investigated by counter-terrorism investigators for accepting bribes from Putin's Russia for selling out his own people like his mate Nathan Gill? Because Farage has sold out his people, we know that. What we don't know is if he did it for free because he's a malevolent hobgoblin or he did it for money. But let me know what you think in the comments below. And for more content, you could subscribe to the channel or even join for access to streams and behind the scenes updates. Thanks for watching, and until next time, I'll see you later.